The story begins with a man who worked his entire life to reach the top. He was a black CEO, respected in his industry, known for his sharp mind, calm attitude, and ability to turn small ideas into big successes. People who met him always said the same thing: he carried himself with quiet confidence. He did not show off, but his achievements spoke loudly for him. Over the years, he had built companies, created jobs, helped young entrepreneurs, and earned the respect of business leaders from around the world. One morning, while he was in his office looking over upcoming projects, his assistant walked in with a sleek white envelope. It looked expensive: gold edges, thick paper, and a custom seal of a luxury event company. His assistant smiled and said, "This came for you. It's an invitation." Inside was an invitation to one of the most exclusive yacht parties in the city. This was not just any event, it was a gathering of top CEOs, investors, celebrities, and high-level decision-makers. The kind of people who decide the future of industries. It was the type of event where partnerships were formed, deals worth millions were discussed, and friendships with powerful people were made. Only a few were chosen, and being invited meant you were seen as someone important, someone with influence. The CEO read the invitation carefully. The letter welcomed him personally, thanking him for his contributions to business and innovation. It even mentioned his recent accomplishments, another sign that he had caught the attention of big players. The event would take place on a massive luxury yacht known for hosting royal families, tech giants, and elite investors. A floating palace. Many people would dream of simply seeing it, but he was invited to step on board as a guest. He felt proud, not because he needed validation, but because this invitation represented how far he had come. He remembered his early days, when he was just a young man with big dreams but very small resources. He had faced challenges, prejudice, and rejection throughout his journey. Yet he never let those things stop him. Receiving this invitation felt like proof that all the years of hard work were worth it. He placed the letter on his desk and leaned back in his chair, imagining the event. He pictured mingling with global investors, discussing future projects, and opening doors to new partnerships. It was an opportunity that could expand his business even more. But more than business, he looked forward to meeting people who shared his passion for growth, innovation, and change. As the event day approached, he prepared carefully. He chose a suit that was elegant but simple. His style had always been professional without being flashy. He made sure his schedule was clear so he could attend without stress. His assistant reminded him of the VIP check-in details, the dress code, and the time he should arrive. He thought about the people he would meet, people who controlled major industries, people whose opinions could shape markets. Some of them had probably heard of him, others would meet him for the first time. He wanted to make a good impression, not by talking about himself, but by listening, learning, and sharing his ideas when the moment was right. He had always believed that real influence came from quiet strength, not loud bragging. The night before the party, he stood by his window, looking out at the city lights. He remembered how many obstacles he had faced over the years, contracts lost because of prejudice, opportunities denied, people who doubted him just because of the color of his skin. Yet here he was now, invited to a place where only the elite gathered. It was a symbolic moment. Life had come full circle. He smiled to himself, feeling grateful for the journey. What he did not know was that this simple invitation, which seemed like a celebration of his success, would soon lead to one of the most shocking and powerful moments of his life. A moment that would reveal not only who he was, but also how far he had come, and how much power he truly held. For now, all he felt was excitement. The kind of excitement that comes when you know something great is waiting for you. He set the invitation down, checked the time once more, and prepared for the next day, unaware that everything was about to change. The day of the event finally arrived, and the CEO woke up with a calm but excited feeling. He wasn't nervous, he had attended many big events before, but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the exclusivity. Maybe it was the promise of new partnerships. Or maybe it was the thought of stepping onto a yacht that most people only ever saw in magazines. Whatever the reason, he felt a sense of anticipation that made the morning feel brighter than usual. He got ready slowly, choosing every detail with care. His suit was sharp and tailored, a deep navy color that matched the tone of the evening event. His shoes were polished enough to catch the light, and his watch, a gift he bought for himself years ago after closing his first major deal, sat comfortably on his wrist. He didn't wear it to show off. He wore it because it reminded him of how far he had come. Before leaving, he glanced at the invitation one last time. Everything was in order: instructions, directions, VIP check-in details. He smiled to himself and headed out. The drive to the marina was peaceful. The city streets were busy but beautiful, the sky turning gold as the sun began to set. He enjoyed the view through the window, watching the lights reflect on the buildings. Sometimes, moments like this reminded him why he worked so hard. Not for the fame. Not even for the money. But for the feeling of moving through life with purpose and progress. As he approached the marina, the atmosphere changed. Expensive cars lined the road, luxury brands, shiny metal, and personalized plates. Security was everywhere, guiding traffic, controlling crowds, and making sure everything stayed perfect. The CEO stepped out of his car and looked ahead. The yacht was enormous. It wasn't just big, it looked like a floating mansion. Bright lights wrapped around it like jewelry. Music drifted through the air, mixing with the sound of waves hitting the dock. Well-dressed guests walked toward the entrance, laughing, greeting each other, taking photos. The entire scene felt like something out of a movie. The CEO took a deep breath, appreciating the environment, and then began walking toward the entrance. Heads turned, not because he was famous to everyone, but because he carried himself with confidence. People who didn't know him assumed he belonged there. People who did know him nodded or smiled in recognition. As he approached the check-in area, he noticed the staff behind the VIP counter. They were busy scanning invitations and checking names. Most guests walked through easily. The staff smiled at them, stamped their wrists, and welcomed them warmly. Everything appeared smooth, organized, and professional. But then something changed. When the CEO stepped forward, the behavior of the staff shifted instantly. Their smiles faded. Their tone became stiff. Their eyes narrowed in a way that suggested suspicion, not professionalism. One of the staff members, a tall man with a headset, looked him up and down before speaking. "Can I help you?" he asked, not rudely, but with a tone that carried doubt. The CEO responded politely, "Yes, I'm here for the yacht event. My name is on the VIP list." He handed over the invitation, confident there would be no issue. After all, he was invited personally. His name was printed clearly. His accomplishments were well known. There was no reason for anyone to question him. But the staff member didn't even look at the details properly. He scanned the invitation quickly, almost carelessly, before glancing back up at the CEO. "I'm sorry, sir," he said slowly, "but you're not on the list." The CEO blinked, surprised. He wasn't irritated yet, just confused. "That must be a mistake," he said calmly. "Please check again." The staff member sighed as if he was being bothered. He opened the list, scrolled through it half-heartedly, and shook his head. "No. You're not cleared for this event." Other guests passed by during this moment, walking right in without any trouble. Some even overheard the conversation and looked uncomfortable. A few recognized the CEO and knew he belonged there, but they hesitated to speak. Awkward silence filled the air. The CEO remained composed. Years of experience had taught him patience. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a second confirmation, the digital one he received by email. He held out his phone. "Here is another version, if that helps." But the staff didn't even lean in to look properly. Instead, he stepped back slightly, his expression turning cold. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside." Step aside. That phrase hit harder than the refusal. It wasn't just a request. It was a boundary. A separation. A quiet dismissal. And it was clear, very clear, that the problem wasn't paperwork. The problem was prejudice. The CEO knew this tone. He had heard it before. In boardrooms. In restaurants. In places where people assumed he didn't belong, not because of his achievements, but because of his appearance. Still, he stayed calm. "Is there a supervisor I can speak to?" he asked. The staff member crossed his arms. "There's nothing more to discuss." The CEO nodded slowly, realizing the truth. They never even intended to check properly. They didn't expect someone like him to be invited to a luxury event like this. They didn't want to believe he was a VIP. As he stepped aside, a strange calm washed over him. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Something else, something stronger. He knew who he was. He knew what he had built. And he knew one thing with absolute clarity. This moment would not end the way they expected. He stood quietly, looking at the yacht, the waves, the glowing lights. Behind his calm eyes, a decision was forming. A decision that would change everything, not just for him, but for the event, the organizers, and every person watching. They thought they were stopping him from entering a party. They had no idea they were about to lose the yacht itself. The CEO stood there quietly, a few steps away from the check-in point, watching the staff continue their duties as if nothing unusual had happened. People kept walking past him, laughing, taking selfies, greeting friends, showing their invitations with excitement. The music from the yacht grew louder as the doors opened and closed, and each time he heard the noise, it reminded him of where he was supposed to be. Inside. Not here. Not standing on the side like an outsider. But he kept a calm face. Inside, however, something else was happening. A slow, heavy feeling settled in his chest, not sadness, not embarrassment, but a quiet disappointment. He had dealt with prejudice at many stages of his life. When he was young and tried to apply for scholarships. When he started his first company and investors doubted him before hearing a single idea. Even later, when he became successful, people sometimes assumed he was just lucky, not talented. But this moment felt sharper. Because this time, he wasn't a young man starting out. He was a CEO, a leader who had built himself from nothing. He had earned his place here. Yet once again, someone chose not to see him for who he was. Behind him, a couple who recognized him whispered softly. "Isn't that the founder of?" "Yes, why are they making him wait like that?" Their voices were quiet, but he heard them. He heard everything. The staff continued checking in guests, completely ignoring him. He watched as another man approached the counter with wrinkled clothes and no invitation in hand. The staff smiled at him, asked his name, and found it quickly. They welcomed him inside without any hesitation. The CEO let out a slow breath. It wasn't about paperwork. It wasn't about protocol. It was about perception. And they had already decided what they wanted to see. Minutes passed. Then more. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with orange and purple streaks. The marina lights turned on, reflecting on the water like stars floating on the surface. Guests continued entering the yacht, but the CEO now stood alone on the side, like a shadow. Finally, the staff member with the headset glanced at him again. This time with impatience. "Sir, you'll need to leave the entrance area," he said. "This space is for confirmed guests only." His tone was firm, as if the CEO was a troublemaker, someone creating a scene. Yet the CEO hadn't raised his voice even once. He hadn't argued or complained. He simply waited, giving them every chance to correct their mistake. But they never intended to. The CEO kept his voice steady. "I have an invitation. You haven't checked my name properly. The staff member shook his head. We've checked. You're not on the list. Please don't make this difficult. That phrase, "don't make this difficult," felt like a slap. As if he was the problem. As if he was causing trouble simply by existing. He tried once more. Not out of desperation, but out of principle. Can you at least check the digital directory, he asked. Or call the event organizer? The man stepped closer and lowered his voice sharply. I said you're not getting in. If you don't leave the area, we'll have to involve security. Those words hit harder than anything else. Not because he feared security, but because of what they implied. They didn't see him as a CEO. They didn't see him as a VIP guest. They didn't even see him as a professional man. They saw him as a problem. For the first time, the CEO felt a small spark of anger. Not loud anger, quiet anger. The kind that sits deep inside and grows stronger each second. He had spent years proving himself, working harder than others, staying disciplined, staying focused. And even with all his achievements, there were still people ready to push him aside without giving him a chance to speak. He looked at the staff member, then at the yacht, then at the water. And in that moment, something inside him changed. The disappointment melted away. The anger settled into something sharper, something like purpose. He straightened his suit, adjusted his cuffs, and nodded once. Understood, he said quietly. The staff member smirked, believing he had won. He turned away without another word, as if the CEO no longer existed. The CEO stepped back slowly, moving away from the entrance. But his mind was not stepping back. His mind was racing forward. He thought about the owners of the yacht. He had met them years ago. They respected him. He had helped them once with a business problem. They owed him a favor. And the yacht, he knew it wasn't just a party venue. It was actually available for purchase. He remembered hearing that the owner was considering selling it soon. Suddenly, everything connected in his mind. He realized something powerful. They thought they could deny him entry. They didn't know he had the power to buy the very thing they were guarding. They thought they were humiliating him. They had no idea they were giving him the greatest opportunity for a symbolic victory. He walked away from the check-in area with a calm expression, but inside, a new plan was forming, clear, confident, unstoppable. He took out his phone. Not to call a friend. Not to call the event organizers. Not to argue. But to make the call that would change everything. A single call, that would lead to the most unexpected twist of the entire night. A twist no one at the marina was prepared for. A twist that would turn humiliation into power. He dialed a familiar number. The phone rang once. Then came a voice he knew well. Hello. It's been a long time. The CEO spoke softly, but with unshakable confidence. I'd like to discuss purchasing your yacht. Tonight. And that was the moment everything changed. The phone call felt strangely calm, despite everything that had just happened. The CEO stepped farther away from the entrance, moving toward a quiet corner of the marina where the sound of waves softened the noise of laughter and music coming from the yacht. He didn't want anyone nearby to overhear what he was about to say, not because he was hiding anything, but because this moment demanded privacy. It was the beginning of a decision that would change the entire night. The voice on the other end of the phone belonged to an old acquaintance, a man named Adrian, wealthy, influential, and the current owner of the massive luxury yacht anchored only a few feet away. Years ago, when Adrian's business had faced a major financial crisis, the CEO's advice had saved him from bankruptcy. They weren't close friends, but they shared a deep professional respect. And in business, respect was worth more than friendship. Adrian sounded pleasantly surprised. It's been a long time, he said warmly. Everything okay? You never call this late. The CEO looked back at the entrance where the staff had dismissed him. The humiliation was still fresh, but instead of making him bitter, it made him sharper. Focused. Determined. He responded slowly, choosing his words with precision. "I'm at the marina," he said. "And I understand you're considering selling the yacht." There was a pause on the other end, long enough to show Adrian was caught off guard but not long enough to show hesitation. "I am," he replied honestly. "I've been thinking about it for months. Maintenance is too much, and I barely use it anymore." "Why do you ask?" The CEO looked at the yacht again, its lights glowing on the water, reflecting like a crown floating on the sea. "I want to buy it," he said. "Tonight." Another pause, but this time, the silence carried excitement. "Tonight?" Adrian repeated. "You're serious?" "Completely." The calmness in the CEO's voice carried a weight that needed no explanation. Adrian didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He had been in the business world long enough to recognize the tone of a man who was done being underestimated. "Well," Adrian said, "if you want it, it's yours. I'll have my lawyer send over the paperwork immediately. We can finalize the terms in an hour." The CEO nodded. This was happening faster than he expected, but perfectly so. "Thank you," he said. "I'll handle everything." They exchanged a few more details: price, transfer process, immediate ownership rights. When the call ended, the CEO slipped the phone back into his pocket and exhaled slowly. Just a few minutes earlier, he had been refused entry to a party he had been invited to. Laughed off. Pushed aside like he didn't belong. But now, with one phone call, the entire situation had turned upside down. This was the turning point. Not because he was buying a yacht. Not because he wanted revenge. But because he was reclaiming the dignity they tried to take from him. He stood for a moment, watching the large yacht sway gently on the water. People inside were dancing, drinking, and celebrating, unaware that the very ground beneath their feet, the yacht itself, no longer belonged to the event organizers. It belonged to him. He thought about walking back to the check-in desk right now and informing them he was the new owner. The image made him smile slightly. But he wasn't going to rush. He believed in timing. He believed in delivering a message when it would make the deepest impact. He took in the night air, letting the salty breeze cool his mind as memories from earlier flooded back. The staff's suspicious stares. Their dismissive tone. The command to step aside. The threat to call security. They saw him as someone who didn't belong near wealth, luxury, or power. They didn't know they were speaking to someone who represented all of those things. He walked back toward the main walkway but stayed in the shadows, observing. The event staff continued their work. Guests continued arriving. Nothing had changed, for them. But everything had changed for him. His phone buzzed again. A message from Adrian's lawyer, documents attached, ready for signature. The CEO reviewed them carefully, not out of doubt but because he was a man who approached everything with precision. The legal confirmation took only 15 minutes. In that moment, the transfer was complete. The yacht was officially his. No argument. No permission needed. No validation from anyone. The same staff who refused him would now be standing on property he owned, property they believed he didn't deserve to enter. A quiet, powerful satisfaction spread through his chest. But it wasn't petty satisfaction. It wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was the satisfaction that came from turning pain into power. From transforming humiliation into authority. From reminding the world that respect is not given, it is earned, and once earned, cannot be taken away by small-minded people. He adjusted his suit, brushed off the final traces of disappointment, and began walking back toward the yacht, but not as a guest this time. He walked with the steady, unshakable confidence of a man who owned the entire vessel. The turning point was complete. The next part of the night would not be about refusal. It would be about revelation. And the staff, the organizers, And every guest on that yacht were about to discover exactly who they had underestimated. The marina lights shimmered across the water as the CEO made his way back toward the yacht, but now he walked with a different energy, quiet, controlled, but unmistakably powerful. Moments earlier, he had stood outside like an unrecognized guest. Now, he walked as the owner of the very yacht the staff believed he didn't belong near. The weight of this shift didn't inflate his ego, instead, it settled inside him like calm fire, steady, warm, and purposeful. His phone vibrated once more. A final message from Adrian's lawyer confirmed everything. Congratulations on your purchase. Ownership has officially transferred. He paused for a moment to take it in. The contract had been signed, processed, and filed. All rights had been transferred. The yacht, the crew, the schedule, the event rights, all now belonged to him. It was more than a purchase. It was a statement. Not a loud one. Not a petty one. A quiet, decisive declaration that dignity is not negotiable, and disrespect always has consequences. He reached the edge of the dock and looked at the massive vessel. Its size was breathtaking. Multi-level decks. Crystal lights. Glass railings. A grand structure floating on the ocean like a kingdom. People danced on the upper floors, unaware that the night's power dynamic had shifted entirely. He could hear snippets of conversations drifting in the wind. This yacht is worth millions. The investors are all here. The staff here is so strict, good security though. He almost smiled at that last line. Strict security. Yes. Strict enough to deny the owner himself. He didn't hurry. He didn't storm in. Instead, he took his time walking along the wooden dock, listening to the waves, letting the moment unfold naturally. He believed in arriving when the universe handed him the right moment. And that moment came. A group of late-arriving guests walked toward the check-in desk. One man in the group, a tall investor the CEO recognized from a previous conference, spotted him walking nearby. "Hey! Aren't you?" the investor began, walking toward him with excitement. The CEO nodded politely. "Good evening." The investor shook his hand warmly. "I didn't know you'd be here tonight. This event is huge. Everyone wants to meet you these days. You're practically reshaping the industry." Their conversation was warm, respectful, and genuine, the way professionals treated each other. The investor talked about future collaborations, upcoming technology deals, and how the CEO's latest project was already attracting global attention. While they talked, the staff member with the headset noticed them. His expression shifted from annoyance to confusion. Why was this man he had rejected, being greeted so enthusiastically by an important guest? He approached the CEO slowly, clearly uncomfortable. "Sir," he said, still trying to maintain the same firm tone as before. "You cannot stand here." "Only confirmed." The CEO didn't even need to speak. The investor beside him cut in sharply. "Are you serious?" the investor snapped. "Do you know who you're talking to? He's one of the most successful CEOs in the country. He should be the first person on your list." The staff member opened his mouth but no words came out. The confidence he had earlier melted instantly. But the CEO lifted a hand gently, signaling the investor to calm down. "It's fine," he said calmly. "He'll understand in a moment." The staff member looked confused. Completely lost. Right then, at the perfect moment, the yacht's captain, who had just received the ownership update from his crew, walked down from the entrance. His uniform was crisp, his expression respectful. When he saw the CEO, he stopped in his tracks, straightened his posture, and approached quickly. "Sir," the captain said, voice steady but filled with new respect. "Welcome. I've been informed of the ownership transfer. The yacht is now fully under your authority. How would you like to proceed?" Silence fell around them. The investor's eyes widened. Nearby guests turned to stare. The staff member's face drained of color. The CEO looked at the captain, then at the staff member who had refused him. "So," he said quietly, "I have full control of the schedule for tonight?" "Yes, sir," the captain confirmed. "The entire event is now under your command." The staff member stepped back, panic rising in his eyes. The same man who had told him to step aside now stood frozen like a statue. The CEO didn't enjoy humiliating people. But he believed in justice. In accountability. In teaching lessons that echo long after words are forgotten. He turned to the captain again. "Cancel the event," he said calmly. "Escort every guest off the yacht." The captain nodded. "Immediately, sir." Guests who had just walked onto the yacht were turned around. People inside were told the event was over. Music stopped. Lights dimmed. Confusion erupted. What happened? Why is the event cancelled? Is there an emergency? No one had answers, except the CEO. He stood there silently, watching the staff member tremble as the realization sunk in. He had refused entry to the owner. He had tried to embarrass someone who owned more than he could imagine. He had misjudged a man whose power didn't need bragging. The CEO stepped closer and said in a voice soft but strong. "This was never about a party. It was about respect." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult anyone. He didn't need to. The truth already echoed loud enough. Guests left the yacht in disbelief. The investor shook his head and whispered, they had no idea who they were dealing with. The CEO simply straightened his jacket, hands steady, expression calm. He had bought a yacht, not to show power, but to make a point. A point that would be remembered. A point that would travel farther than any party ever could. And as the night settled, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a purchase. It was history. As the music faded and the lights dimmed across the yacht, a strange quietness fell over the marina. Moments ago, the vessel had been filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and celebration. Now, confusion floated in the air like mist over the water. People stepped off the yacht one by one, escorted by the crew, their faces puzzled, whispering among themselves, unsure why a glamorous event had suddenly come to an end. They didn't know that the entire night had shifted because of one man. The CEO stood at the base of the dock, watching guests exit with bewildered expressions. But he did not smile, nor did he look proud. Instead, he wore the same calm expression he always carried, steady, disciplined, controlled. He wasn't seeking revenge. He wasn't celebrating. He was simply restoring a sense of balance, taking back the dignity that someone had tried to take from him. But now, there was one more step left in the night, the moment when the truth would be revealed, not only to the staff but to every person who had just been forced off the yacht. The captain approached him respectfully. "Sir," he said, bowing his head slightly, "the guests have all been informed. They're waiting outside seeking an explanation. Shall I address them, or would you prefer to?" The CEO did not hesitate. "I'll speak." He walked slowly toward the gathering crowd. The marina lamps cast soft light across the dock, creating long shadows that stretched behind him. The guests murmured, recognizing him, but unsure why he would be speaking instead of the event organizers. A few of them called out. "What's happening? Is the event cancelled permanently? Is there an emergency?" The CEO stopped in front of them, dozens of influential people, investors, celebrities, and business leaders, all waiting for answers. He cleared his throat gently. "Good evening," he began, his voice firm but polite. "I want to thank all of you for your patience. The event tonight has been officially cancelled, because this yacht is now under my ownership." Gasps rippled through the group. Some people exchanged shocked looks. Others stared at him wide-eyed. Few whispered. "He bought the yacht. That's impossible. No way, when did this happen?" But it was the truth. The CEO continued, speaking clearly so everyone could hear. When I arrived earlier, he said, I came as an invited guest. I looked forward to meeting many of you, discussing ideas, and celebrating the hard work we all put into our industries. But when I reached the entrance, I was refused entry without reason. My name was not checked properly. My confirmation was ignored. My presence was questioned. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. The staff member who had refused him stood off to the side, sinking into himself, face pale, unable to speak. The CEO continued. Now, I am not a man who raises his voice, and I am not a man who argues with someone who is determined not to listen. But I am a man who believes in dignity. And tonight, that dignity was challenged. People nodded quietly. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked angry, not at him, but at the situation. He took a slow breath and continued. Instead of arguing with those who refuse to see me for who I am, I decided to speak in the language they understand. Someone whispered, power. The CEO glanced toward the yacht. In the business world, we rise not through noise, but through decisions. Through actions. And so, tonight, I made a decision. I contacted the owner of the yacht. And within the hour, I purchased it. The crowd stood silent. Complete, stunned silence. No one had ever seen a decision like this made so calmly, so quickly, so powerfully. He wasn't done. He turned slightly toward the staff member who had refused him, not to embarrass him, but to deliver truth. Respect, the CEO said softly, is not about wealth or status. It is about recognizing another person's humanity. Tonight, I was denied that respect. Not because of paperwork. Not because of protocol. But because someone chose to judge me before they knew me. The staff member looked down, unable to lift his eyes. The CEO's tone remained gentle but strong, like a quiet storm. I canceled the event tonight not to punish anyone here, but to make it clear that discrimination has consequences. Not dramatic consequences. Not angry consequences. Just, consequences. Guests exchanged looks, some ashamed that they had never questioned the unfairness they witnessed earlier. One woman stepped forward cautiously. That staff member, he treated you like you didn't belong, she said quietly. The CEO nodded. Yes. But that is not new to people like me. He looked around the crowd, at their expensive suits, glittering jewelry, flawless makeup. All my life, I've had to prove I belong in rooms that were never built for me. And every time, I did it with grace. Tonight is no different. His voice softened even more. I do not want apologies. I do not want sympathy. I want understanding. And I want every person here to remember this moment. Not because I bought a yacht. But because I did not allow disrespect to silence me. His words hung in the air like truth written across the night sky. One final wave of shock washed across the crowd. Not one person could deny the power of what had just happened. The CEO concluded with a calm nod. You may all leave for the evening. Thank you. There was no arrogance in his tone. No pride. Just certainty. Guests slowly began to leave, still buzzing with disbelief, respect, and admiration. Some approached him to shake his hand. Others simply bowed their heads politely. The story would soon spread across social media, across news networks, across every business circle imaginable. A black CEO refused entry to a yacht party. So he bought the yacht. And canceled the event. It would become a message. A lesson. A legend. But for him, it was simply the truth. He turned away, walking back toward the yacht, not as a rejected guest, not as a victim of prejudice, but as its rightful owner, ready to decide what came next. And the night was far from over. The sun had barely risen the next morning, but the world was already awake, because of him. News reporters gathered near the marina like birds waiting for a signal. Their cameras pointed toward the massive yacht, which now looked even larger and more powerful under the early morning light. Social media was exploding with posts, photos, videos, and hashtags spreading the story everywhere. People from all over the world were arguing, praising, criticizing, and analyzing every detail. Yet inside the yacht, the CEO sat at the dining table, calmly eating breakfast. He wasn't reading the news. He wasn't checking the comments. He wasn't even looking at his phone. He simply enjoyed a quiet morning, breathing comfortably for the first time in days. But outside, the world was not quiet at all. A soft knock came at the door. His assistant, Maya, entered carefully, holding a tablet full of notifications. "Sir," she began, "your story is everywhere. Every news channel is talking about you. Half the world thinks you're a hero. The other half thinks you destroyed an event for dramatic effect." The CEO closed his eyes briefly, then opened them, steady as always. "It doesn't matter what they think," he said calmly. "It matters what they learn." Maya nodded. She admired the way he never lost control, not last night, not now, not ever. But this time, there were bigger consequences. And she knew he needed to hear them. "Some guests who were removed from the party are demanding refunds," she said. "Others are demanding explanations. And the original event organizers, well, they're furious." "Because I bought the yacht?" he asked lightly. "No," she said. "Because you taught them a lesson publicly." He gave a small smile. Lessons are rarely appreciated. Before she could reply, the yacht staff manager entered the room, nervous but respectful. "Sir, there are reporters outside. Hundreds of them. They want a statement." The CEO stood slowly, wiping his hands calmly with a napkin. "They'll get one," he said. Maya followed him as he walked toward the upper deck. As he stepped outside, the bright daylight hit him, and in the distance, microphones rose like a field of metal flowers, all pointing at him. The moment he appeared, reporters erupted. "Did you buy the yacht out of anger? Do you regret canceling the event? Was this an act of revenge? Do you plan to sue the staff member who denied you entry? What message are you sending to the world?" He waited patiently, letting the noise fill the air before raising his hand. Instantly, silence fell. His voice was calm, but carried across the crowd with commanding strength. "I did not buy this yacht out of anger," he began. "Last night was not revenge. It was a response to disrespect, and a reminder that dignity is not negotiable." Cameras clicked. The entire marina leaned in to listen. "When someone is judged because of their skin color," he continued, "or dismissed because they don't fit someone else's idea of wealth, that is not a small mistake. That is a crack in the foundation of fairness." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I did not cancel the event to embarrass anyone. I canceled it because I will not support any celebration built on discrimination." Reporters exchanged glances, some impressed, some conflicted, but all attentive. "But what about the staff member?" another reporter asked. "Will there be consequences for him?" The CEO shook his head. "Punishing him won't change anything," he said. "But changing the culture will." He looked around at the cameras. "This is not just about me," he said. "This is about every person who has been told, silently or loudly, that they don't belong. That their presence is a surprise. That they need permission to be respected." A soft wind blew across the deck, carrying his words toward the crowd. "I hope this moment teaches people to think before they judge," he said gently. To pause before they insult. To remember that every person they meet has a story, a journey, a dignity that deserves recognition. The marina fell silent. Even the waves seemed to pause. A reporter raised her hand hesitantly. "What will you do with the yacht now?" He smiled faintly. "I'll decide soon. But one thing is certain, this yacht will never again host an event where anyone is treated as less. Not while it's under my name. Applause broke out from a few people in the back. Others recorded, already imagining the headlines. But the CEO didn't stay for applause. He turned, walked back inside, and closed the door. Inside, Maya looked at him with admiration. "Sir," she said softly, "people are calling you an icon today." He shook his head gently. "I'm not an icon," he said. "I'm just tired of being polite to prejudice." His voice was steady, not angry, just honest. But he could already feel something shifting. The world was listening. The world was watching. And whether he wanted it or not, the world was changing because of him. Yet the story wasn't finished, not yet. Because the person who started all this, the staff member who refused him, was about to return. And that would set the stage for what came next.